Welcome back to another exciting video on not one, but two of the hottest topics on YouTube: Bitcoin and artificial intelligence. Let's merge them together. And you might be thinking, what's the relationship between Bitcoin and artificial intelligence? Why put the two together in a single video? It's madness. It's crazy. In this video, I'm going to talk to you about how artificial intelligence is being used on public blockchain data to put together the day, time, and amount of every transaction you have ever made. I just hope you didn't do anything weird with it. As long as you didn't buy anything weird, no problem. But if you did, yeah, you're. So if you've ever made a transaction with Bitcoin or Ethereum, there's a public record of it. And besides the IRS, there's plenty of people, governments, and companies that want to apply artificial intelligence to all those transactions to figure out who bought what and why. So in this video, I want to talk about one of the most crucial concepts that you can apply to Bitcoin, and that's traceability. So Bitcoin is a public ledger. The way I think of it is it's a spreadsheet, just like you would have seen on your computer with Excel. Imagine something like that exists on the cloud, and it's duplicated and synced up perfectly among many different people. And in the cells of this spreadsheet are transactions. One wallet address sent X amount of Bitcoin to another wallet address. Now they update on both sides of that spreadsheet who has what. And everything always balances out all the time. Now, of course, there's a system like that used in private banking. It's called the SWIFT system. But the difference is those are not public. In Bitcoin's case, it's a publicly available spreadsheet of transactions that anybody can analyze. So that means anybody in the world who has an internet connection can download the entire history, the entire Bitcoin blockchain, and then they can start tinkering around with it, and they can apply artificial intelligence in many different ways, and I promise you that is happening right now all over the world. And one of the strangest things about the way the narrative for Bitcoin has evolved from its inception is it's always been known as a place to conduct business privately or off government radar, but that's absolutely not the case. In fact, much more money laundering happens in the US dollar than it will ever happen on Bitcoin. And the funny thing is, since the inception of Bitcoin, one of the main narratives has been privacy, but I've never really understood that. It's private if the wallet addresses are not attached to a person, but as soon as they are, you end up knowing more about that person's buying history than you ever would from the traditional banking system. And maybe in the early days when nobody wanted to spend the time to look through this blockchain and pair it up with people, but as Bitcoin becomes a major asset across the world, that narrative should be dropped immediately. So let's dive deeper and answer some questions about the anonymity of Bitcoin. So before we talk about the different ways that machine intelligence is being applied to the Bitcoin blockchain, let's dive deeper and answer some questions about the anonymity of Bitcoin. So there's a little bit of nuance in this, because if you know what you're doing and you use it properly and understand how it works, there are ways that you could use Bitcoin in ways that are more private than the public banking system. But most people aren't using it that way. So it's not fair to say that that's the way that it works. Now, when you open a new bank account, a bank official asks you for personal details to record your KYC data. So if you want to go to the bank and open up a brand new bank account, the banking teller will ask you for your personal details. This is called KYC. KYC stands for Know Your Customer, and it's an American law that banks have to abide by to keep their license, and they ask people who set up accounts for this verified information from a driver's license, from a passport, so that the government and the IRS have access to what you have bought, and they can use that so you don't, run away with money or move it offshore or not pay your taxes, all the kind of stuff that governments rely on. But in some sense, even though the government does know who you are and they do have access to what you're buying, that's still a private banking system. That information is not publicly available unless it's been hacked or something like that, so it can't be analyzed by foreign governments and nefarious actors. So in that sense, it's actually more private, except for to your own government. Now here's where it gets tricky, because cryptocurrency exchanges often do ask for KYC information. They need to abide by know your customer laws if they're located in certain jurisdictions. So generally speaking, a lot of credible cryptocurrency exchanges will ask you for KYC information. That helps them be compliant, and that's pretty normal. But that's not always the case. There's also cryptocurrency exchanges that have jurisdiction outside of the United States, and because of the way Bitcoin works as somewhat of a world currency, they're totally usable. But, and it's a big but, they're doing it for specifically the reason of being in the gray area of the law. So it's not like you can have confidence that the KYC requirements will never show up, or that they won't be required to work with the government in some ways, or that even a government from another country might force them to do something, or maybe they've already given up data from their customers and correlated it to you in some way. So there's not an easy way to say that one is better than the other. But if you want to play it straight and you want to be, a US citizen like I am, the best thing to do probably is just to do KYC right out the gate so you don't have to worry about that kind of stuff. But that's not financial advice. Feel free to mess around with that if you want to. Now, the other thing to note is that unlike a bank account where you might just have one place where the money starts, it originates from KYC and then moves out to other credible bank accounts, with Bitcoin, you can generate multiple wallet addresses. Now, usually a cryptocurrency exchange will have one, but it certainly can have many. When you're putting Bitcoin onto a private wallet, you can generate as many as you want. You can move them around, you can shuffle money around. So in some sense, you can make it much more complicated. But as we talk about later in this video, artificial intelligence is getting pretty smart, and it's only getting smarter, and it's not gonna have that much trouble putting all the pieces back together in the future. So definitely be careful. And here's where we get into the weird anonymity paradox, the Bitcoin paradox of privacy. You make a digital trail when you transact in Bitcoin. If nobody knows who made that trail, either end of it, who started it and who ended it, it's essentially anonymous. Nobody will actually know where that came from and where it went, and then there's nothing to track. But still, it's suspicious. For a computer that can see trillions of these things, it knows which ones have been tracked down, which ones haven't been, and then it's just detective work. If somebody really wants to know badly enough, a lot of times, most of the time, they will find out. So you might be anonymous today or for years to come, but if anyone ever puts that trail together, say somebody else in future years gets in trouble and they make their wallet addresses public, and then that's one end of the trail that you transacted with, all of a sudden they're closer to finding out who you are. They can just start saying, who would this person have done business with? It can all be tracked down. Now, there's a decent amount of information whenever you give one Bitcoin to someone else that's recorded into the ledger. The basics are how many Bitcoins transferred from one wallet to another. If they were split up or broke apart, that information is in there. The date, the time, and the transaction ID, which is a unique number that's relevant only to that transaction, those are all saved forever. Thus, it's better to say that Bitcoin is pseudonymous rather than anonymous. Let me explain. We can't call Bitcoin anonymous anymore, just simply for the way that it's been created, the way that it works, and the way the world uses it now. Because everything is traceable, it gives us a lot of confidence that there's no inflation going on, that the amount of Bitcoin, our 21 million, will never be surpassed. Those are key and powerful tools to helping Bitcoin keep its value. But that transparency that's so key to trusting Bitcoin also brings a level of transparency that is trickling down into everybody who uses it. So, just to drive that point home, if you are connected to a wallet address, it is not anonymous. So instead, a term like unlinkability needs to be used for Bitcoin anonymity. And as long as we're speaking about flying under the radar, that brings me to our sponsor, nobody. Because we only have 564 subscribers, and sponsors don't really care about your channel when it's this small. And look, just being real with you, I dream about being a YouTuber full-time. I hope this channel one day can make enough money that I don't have to go back to my regular job. So if you could support me and maybe make a comment, hit the like button, subscribe, that sort of thing, means the world to me. I really appreciate it. Now, back to the video. So if you're a machine intelligence fan like I am, now the part that you've been waiting for. How does AI track down people, associate them, and find out how you are spending your money. Now, if you've made a Bitcoin transaction, have you ever noticed that you receive a reference ID when it's placed into the block? So this reference ID can link to a whole lot of other details. And it seems reasonable to at first not understand how someone out there might be linking that information back to you. But these details are like roadmaps on how to get to your house. If somebody understands the streets and they know where they are in relation to you and which streets to take, they can find your house. So in Bitcoin terms, if you look at a block explorer, you see what's called a TX ID. This is your transaction ID. That transaction ID is like a reference to your payment order. Like your Amazon buying history, your transaction IDs can easily be associated with all the goods and services you've purchased from, say, a company. If they know your profile when you buy it, they keep track of those TX IDs. That's the list of things that you've bought. And when I talked about the different blocks and the confidence, that's one of those weird things that's sort of unique to Bitcoin that you won't see in the traditional system. So if you give somebody some Bitcoin and the transaction ID has been recorded in the block, every 10 minutes it gets settled across all of the nodes, all the different servers, all of the different people who are keeping all of this information unified, there's a very small chance that something will go wrong with that block and then that money won't go through. So every 10 minutes or so, as another block stacks on top of another block on top of another, the confidence gets so close to 100% that a seller should feel comfortable saying, okay, the money is in my account now. Now that information about how many minutes ago the transaction took place and how many blocks have been stacked on top of it, this is also very public information. So by looking at publicly available data, you can tell how confident you can be that the money is permanently in your wallet. Now let's talk about clustering, the technique that tracks down people's purchases. So advances in AI have led to the development of cluster analysis techniques to reveal patterns and structures, associations, and the relationships from many of these data sources. So I talk a lot about how artificial intelligence is an interesting tool. It's not programmed to do something. It learns from past data, and it's the great structure finder in our universe. Things that don't seem like they have patterns, artificial intelligence can find patterns. And when it comes to finding patterns in Bitcoin, advances in AI have led to cluster analysis techniques. So in the same way YouTube will have a cluster of people who like a certain type of content and a cluster of creators who actually make that kind of content and connect the two, something similar can be done to the Bitcoin blockchain. This kind of technique will reveal patterns, structures, associations, and relationships to the artificial intelligence. By clustering familiar transactions on the Bitcoin network, they can create a picture of how transactions flow around the network. Let's see. So once these clusters exist, new information that is brought into the blockchain in real time can quickly be looked at, patterns can be found, and those kind of transactions can be put into a cluster. That cluster could be something more abstract, like the kind of transactions that are deemed extremely safe, safe, not so safe, unsafe, or potentially illegal. And that kind of cluster is something where a red flag would be assigned by an entity like the IRS. So let's just start with an example. Say you go to a farmer's market just to buy some fruits and vegetables. First off, congratulations on being healthy. Second, you might go into the shop and see that the shopkeeper has arranged the fruits and vegetables by groups. Like, it would make sense that all the apples are together in one part of the farmer's market and that they were even further subdivided into the different types of apples so that somebody can quickly figure out what they want, put it in their cart, and the farmer's market can make more money. And of course that would be the same for the potatoes and the carrots and all the other fruits and vegetables. So now let's apply that concept to the Bitcoin blockchain, but let's use artificial intelligence as the great organizer, the tool that arranges all the fruits and vegetables in this virtual farmer's market. So the clustering algorithm is going to look at a wallet and it's going to see all of the different purchases. And as it clusters together the different types of purchases, if this is somebody who goes to the farmer's market and they see apple, 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 vegetable, 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 they now have a profile. And if they can match that pattern to you because they know you're somebody who goes to the farmer's market and eats a lot of apples, then they have a high probability match. This makes it possible to identify people and map that to the types of spending that they tend to make. And this is only the bottom layer. This is information that might be highly correlated to a person, but you might not have the kind of confidence to say this is who this person is and this is what they bought. But it can certainly be paired with other layers of information. Here's the scary part. Whenever you're online, you have an IP address. When you bought the internet for your home, you were assigned an IP. Now, in some cases, people might mask their IP, but generally speaking, where your computer is located is pretty much public information. And when you use that IP to log into a cryptocurrency exchange, boom, that is associated probably to your house. Another artificial intelligence can look for a different type of mapping. A cluster of people, addresses, and purchases can then be triangulated, higher confidence. And even if you've made so few purchases right now using Bitcoin that there isn't enough data to link all these patterns together, over time the tools become better, and over time you probably make more patterns to be found. So in some sense, it's nearly inevitable, unless you're doing a lot of work, you're really smart, and you know how this system works and specifically work to avoid it, that you will be identified. But I've kind of used this as a framework, like that's a really bad thing. Also, there's a lot of people that subscribe to the thought that it's okay, like know who I am. In fact, it'd actually be easier for me to just sort of be upfront with my Bitcoin purchases, pay my taxes, and be on the winning side of the system when you go find criminals. Also, I hope I haven't painted too much of a picture that like the whole goal is to be private. Now, cryptocurrency comes from a certain culture where decentralization and privacy was very prized. I respect that, I love that, but also I do think there is a role for regulation and for some understanding of who's using it in the right ways so that our government can actually go out and try to find the people that are using it in the wrong ways. So now let's talk about, if there's all this traceability, how we can use it to find the bad guys. Let's talk about money laundering. Now, the frequency that anonymous transactions are made on cryptocurrency exchanges poses various problems for different law enforcement agencies. And arguably, I can see both sides of this, it actually puts the financial industry at some level of risk. The uncertainty, the uncontrollability might be something that wobbles markets, it makes Bitcoin more volatile, and can be somewhat threatening for a world where it really does help to have some stability with prices. So in the cryptocurrency world, a criminal might try to mask their identity and launder money by transferring their illegal Bitcoin into controlled digital wallets. This becomes a bit of a chicken or an egg problem, depends on how complicated the methods are that a criminal is using to obfuscate or mix up all of their wallet addresses to find out who these people are and how they might be mixing up their addresses. Now, the term that is used is called tumbling or mixing. This is where you send money into a specific wallet address that breaks it up, that rearranges it, that puts it back together, often in very complex ways, with the goal of having the Bitcoin come out the other end without a direct connection between the original and receiving wallets. So I don't know how well you can trust something like this. I know there are some breakthroughs with something called zero knowledge proofs, and some of the cryptocurrencies out there are specifically designed in some sort of a way to try to obfuscate this information. But when it really comes to hiding the history of a Bitcoin, I think that it's very, very hard to do. And even if you've done it in the past with a mixer, those could be obsolete now, and you would need to do it again and again and again. And that brings me back to the one thing that I always come back to, which is that artificial intelligence needs to learn. And Bitcoin is an interesting way to teach it because it's a reflection of GDP and how commerce works and all of these weird, intricate things about the world economy. But like predicting the stock market, it can be very difficult. These clusters change all of the time. Patterns emerge and then they disappear just as fast. There isn't a true structure to the way that the world interacts, and there isn't a true way to always predict who owns what wallet and what they're going to do with that money. But when you do identify someone, they sign up with a cryptocurrency exchange, they do KYC, they send copies of their driver's license or their passport in, and they're given an identity, then all of a sudden, all of the history that might have been hidden before, the first time they send money from their wallet into the cryptocurrency exchange, can be traced backwards. That process is called peeling. So peeling involves discovering and identifying a transaction, having a partial amount of crypto peeled off, and then the remainder getting transferred back to a particular address. This peeled contact information can offer analysts valuable lead insights and information into what happened previously before this person KYC'd. But before the video gets too long, clustering and peeling are one of many analytical strategies that AI can excel at when it comes to figuring out who has done what on the Bitcoin blockchain. And recent advances in artificial intelligence are bringing even more tools, stuff that we haven't even thought of before, to the table. And more data and more computation means that they're getting better at doing that job. Also, these same AI tools are used not just on cryptocurrencies, but in the actual banking sector. There's a lot of private companies using artificial intelligence just to find general credit card fraud. And they're spending a lot of money on cybersecurity. So these cutting-edge algorithms can comb through massive amounts of data, and huge server farms have been made just to collect and analyze this data already. But anyways, in summary, all I want you to know is that with the 1.6 trillion Bitcoin transactions that have been made to date, it might have been possible to hide in the chaos a few years ago. But realistically, you should get that thought out of your mind and know that if you make a transaction with Bitcoin, it very likely will be connected to your identity. So be careful. And as promised, here's an image generated by the prompt, "What would deja vu look like to an artificial intelligence?" as requested by Taya Pawa in the comment section of the last video. Thanks for that prompt. Yeah, and if you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Bitcoin Anonymity, or if you want to check out our other two YouTube channels. We also have a Be Curious reaction channel and a Be Curious podcast. I would love to see you over there too. All right, so that's it. Be careful with your Bitcoin transactions, and I will see you in the next video.